Good morning. I am the Reverend Denise Gouch, the minister of this congregation. Welcome to today's service on this beautiful fall day. It is so good to see your faces. This morning, the Reverend Dr. Michelle Peterson will be addressing us from the actual pulpit in our sanctuary as we prepare technologically for hybrid services coming soon, which will allow us to gather virtually and in person at the same time. We are, of course, excited to be testing our setup and even happier to hear once again from Reverend Michelle. Live this morning in the sanctuary, in addition to Reverend Michelle, Nathaniel Reveal is serving as service coordinator and presenter. Jesse Spencer Smith is our Zoom host, and remotely, Karen Spencer Smith is our co-host. Scott Findley prepared the service script and slides, but most importantly, we have you. Come, let us gather together.
Thank you, Reverend Denise. What a joy it is to have you with us. Please reach out to Reverend Denise at revdenise@gnuuc.org when you have joys, sorrows, concerns, or ideas to share. As we light our chalice, I'll share this passage from Monica Jacobson Tennyson. What is it that gives us the power to make that change, to ask that question, to take that journey? It is relationship, the beating heart of our faith. Our covenant gives us the opportunity to renew our promise to one another, to practice kindness. Please join me in reading if you are so moved. We covenant together to make a welcoming community, to walk together in the way of truth and love, to seek the life of the Spirit as it is known by each person, to support each other in thought, word, and deed as we work to build a better world. Our opening hymn this morning is Come, Come, Whoever You Are. Please enjoy singing at home as you are moved.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer. You are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Ours
Our connection with Room in the Inn goes back many years. Many of us were touched by the connections we made when we housed the gentleman in our sanctuary for several years, thanks to Reverend Michelle getting us connected to the Winter Shelter Network. Though the pandemic has altered our ability to host, the work continues nonetheless, thanks in part to Chris Thresher's daughter, Audrey, who is the Room at the Inn volunteer coordinator. And this gives us real-time insight to what their needs are. At this time, monetary donations are the most flexible way to support their work. So please donate as you are able. The person we may find it hardest to be kind and sympathetic to is, surprisingly, ourselves. For our Time for All Sages, here's a story titled How to Be a Friend to Yourself.
Trying to be a better friend to yourself sounds like an odd idea initially, because we naturally imagine a friend as someone else, not as a part of our own mind. But there is value in the concept because of the extent to which we know how to treat our own friends with a sympathy and imagination we seldom apply to ourselves. If a friend is in trouble, our first instinct is rarely to tell them that they are fundamentally a shithead and a failure. If a friend complains that their partner isn't very warm to them, we don't tell them they're getting what they deserve. We try to reassure them that they're essentially likable and that it's worth investigating what might be done. In friendship, we know instinctively how to deploy strategies of wisdom and consolation that we stubbornly refuse to apply to ourselves. There are some key moves a good friend would typically make, which can provide a model for what we should ideally be doing with ourselves in our own heads. Firstly, a good friend likes you pretty much as you already are. Any suggestion they make or ambition they have about how you could change builds on a background of acceptance. When they propose that you might try a different tack, it's not an ultimatum or a threat. They're not saying that you have to change or be abandoned. The friend insists we're good enough already, but they want to join forces with us to solve a challenge they feel we would properly benefit from overcoming. Without being flattering, good friends also constantly keep in mind certain things we're getting right. They don't think anything wrong with the odd compliment and emphasis on our strengths. It's quietly galling how easily we can lose sight of all our own good points when troubles strike. The friend doesn't fall into this trap. They can acknowledge the difficulties while still holding on to a memory of our virtues. The good friend is compassionate. When we fail, as we will, they are understanding and generous around our mishaps. Our folly doesn't exclude them from the circle of their love. The good friend deftly conveys that to err, fail, and screw up is just what we humans do. We all emerge from childhood with various biases in our character, which evolve to help us cope with our necessarily imperfect parents. And these acquired habits of mind will reliably let us down in adult life. But we're not to be blamed because we didn't deliberately set out to be like this. We didn't realistically have a lot of better options. We're indelibly required to make big decisions before we ever really understand what's at stake or how our choices will play out. We're steering blind in all our large moves around love and work. We opt for a move to a different city, but we can't possibly know whether we're going to flourish there. We have to select a career path when we're still young, and we don't know what our later needs will be. In long-term relationships, we have to make a commitment to another person before we understand what it will be like to tie our lives so deeply to theirs. The good friend knows that failures are not, in fact, rare. They bring as a starting point their own and humanity's vivid experience of messing up into play as key points of reference. They're continually telling us that our specific case might be unique, but that the general structure is common. People don't just sometimes fail, everyone fails, only we don't know about it. It's ironic, yet essentially hopeful, that we usually know quite well how to be a better friend to near strangers than we know how to be to ourselves. The hopefulness lies in the fact that we do actually already possess the relevant skills of friendship. It's just we haven't as yet directed them to the person who probably needs them most, namely, of course, ourselves.
Many of you may know her, and many of you may be getting to know her. Reverend Michelle is our community-affiliated minister for GNUC and a spiritual director in private practice. She received training from the Hezekiah School of Spiritual Direction at the Redemptionist Renewal Center in Tucson, Arizona, and a Master of Divinity from the Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago. Previously, she had earned a doctorate in sociology from Loyola University, Chicago in 2006. More information about Reverend Michelle and her ministry can be found at Spirit Place Nashville, spiritplacenashville.com. Reverend Michelle, we are so happy for you to join us today in our actual sanctuary. Welcome.
It's lovely to be in the sanctuary again. It feels like it's been more than a year and a half. It feels more like 6 or 7 years since I've seen you all. Are you someone that you would like to be friends with? For pleasure, I'm reading a book of fiction which begins with the death of a man and the ensuing drama around his last testament. In life, the man was adversarial, antagonistic, cruel, extremely wealthy, and therefore powerful. He hated everyone, and the feelings were mutual. In life, he treated people poorly, and at his death, his lawyer described his will as wicked. Upon death, he used his vast wealth to injure others one lasting time. He relished the thought of how injurious and cruel his last testament was and how his children would react. He was not the type of person that anyone wanted to be friends with. Now, this might shock you, but I don't have vast wealth that I'll be leaving to anyone upon my death. You might. Unlike the man in the story, though, most of you probably won't have to figure out how or to whom to leave $11 billion, but I could be wrong. What you do have, what you leave behind is extremely valuable. Are you someone that others would like to be friends with? Legacy, the mark you leave on the world, the impact you make on others. What we do today sets the stage for what happens in the future, tomorrow, and many tomorrows. The choices we make in each moment affect the opportunities available for your next choice. There are hundreds of choices and decisions that brought us to this place, to spending the morning together, to this sanctuary, where we're broadcasting into your homes. You each chose to be here this morning, which necessarily limited the other choices you could make for this hour. We believe that the hour we spend together is important for each other and for our own lives. Legacy is often thought of as a personal family legacy, what we pass on to children or grandchildren. Previously available only to scientists, the general public now is more able to access massive tomes of information and trace their ancestry. Both welcome and unwelcome information about parentage became available. Some have learned the names of great-grandparents who lived hundreds of years ago. Now, we all know some history as a culture. The availability of these research tools has made our histories become more specific and concrete. I never knew my great-grandfather, that he had siblings, or that his siblings had children. This year, I had the opportunity to email with one of the children of my great uncle, my cousin twice removed. And then I read his autobiography, which detailed the abuse and racism he experienced as a Native American child in an orphanage in Minnesota. Our cultural legacies of the treatment of children, of violence, abuse, and racism became very specific and concrete for me. Often legacy is thought of in terms of what we can do in our own lifetime and perhaps out 2 generations to grandchildren. Yet legacy is much grander than that. You may know that my spouse and I hold very different views on a lot of issues. So it didn't surprise us all that much when we learned that our ancestors 225 years ago fought on opposing sides of the American Revolution. How will our descendants on October 24th, 2246, 225 years into the future, look upon the battles we engage in today? Are we the kind of people that our descendants would want to be friends with? I do hope that by then, our society will no longer support the death penalty, that violence will be a thing of the past, that there is no question about who controls women's bodies, that discrimination and prejudice are ancient practices, that respect for the inherent worth and dignity for all is simply a given. Legacy isn't only our lifetime, the lifetime of grandchildren, or even several hundred years from now. Our legacy can live much longer. Do you know that there are written documents from 6,000 years ago? Can you even imagine that? That something you write today, someone somewhere may read and ponder the last thing you wrote 225 years, 500 years, 1,000 years. Now consider that the Earth is estimated to be 4.5 billion years old, plus or minus 50 million years. Humans have only been around for 300,000 years, but what a legacy. Are we the kind of people future descendants would want to be friends with? You may not know today what your legacy will become many generations into the future. There are many writers, inventors, artists, scientists whose contributions were not appreciated in their lifetimes. I bet you can think of a few on your own. Those that are commonly accepted now, but weren't, or were even ridiculed in their lifetimes. We can't know the ultimate outcomes of our work, of our lives far into the future. We can, however, choose what we do today. With each small decision we make, we choose to contribute light or darkness to the world. And truly that begins with how we treat ourselves. Are you someone you would want to be friends with? Imagine you're sitting in a cafe. You're prepared to meet somebody you don't know yet. Imagine that someone is you. You are walking in to the cafe prepared to meet yourself for the first time. What thoughts, emotions, feelings do you experience when you see yourself enter the room? Are you criticizing how you dress, the style of your hair, the shoes you're wearing? Feeling dread for what the next hour holds? You have no desire to get to know yourself and are feeling bored, anxious, angry, sad? Or do you feel joyful and happy to see yourself enter the cafe? As you approach the table, you notice your beautiful eyes, the way you smile and light up the room, the calm presence you exude, the energy you radiate, filling the room. Are you excited to have the opportunity to get to know yourself? Is this someone you would want to be friends with? Far too often, the thoughts we have about ourselves are highly critical. We criticize, chastise, and berate ourselves mercilessly. Everyone at one time or another has made a mistake for which we've blamed ourselves. These types of thoughts, constantly blaming and shaming ourselves, is hurtful and quite harmful to our own well-being. Over time, these insidious thoughts damage us emotionally, mentally, spiritually, even physically. These thoughts leave no room for a strong relationship with ourselves. They are injurious to those around us and limit our ability to form and nurture relationships with others. Quoting Eleanor Roosevelt, "Friendship with oneself is all important because without it, one cannot be friends with anyone else in the world." To me, this quote suggests that if I don't treat myself well, I won't know how to treat others well. Conversely, if I don't treat myself well, others won't treat me well either. Relationships, beginning and sustaining them, require an investment of time, attention. A relationship ignored will not grow. Instead, it will wither, dry up, and eventually die. Think about what would happen if you suddenly decided to completely ignore someone in your family, not spending any time with them, not looking at them, not talking to them, giving them absolutely no attention. Well, the same is true of your relationship with self. It requires investment. I know that for some, the idea of spending time in silence alone with their thoughts and feelings is downright terrifying. Yet it is necessary to get to know ourselves, to spend time with ourselves, to discover what it is that we uniquely bring to the world and what we need to flourish. In the recent past, I learned something about myself that I've found to be extremely helpful. Gretchen Rubin, author of The Four Tendencies, the indispensable personality profiles that reveal how to make your life better and other people's lives better too. She found that people fall into four basic groups based on how they respond to outer expectations, what others ask of them, and inner expectations, what we want ourselves to do. The upholders want to know what should be done, and then they just do it. The questioners want justifications. They need to understand why before they'll do something. The obligers need accountability. They'll do it if there's rules guiding it. And then there are the rebels who want freedom to do something their own way. They resist being told what to do by themselves and by others. Understanding how I respond to expectations, both those and of others and my own, enabled me to see some of my experiences from a different perspective. This lens helped me to better understand myself, my interactions with others, and how others interact with me. I now empathize a little more with how difficult it must have been for my mother to raise me. Importantly, I feel more compassion toward myself. Neil Strauss wrote at contemplativemonk.com, "Perhaps the biggest mistake I made in the past was that I believed love was about finding the right person. In reality, love is about becoming the right person. Don't look for the person you want to spend your life with. Become the person you want to spend your life with." Think back upon when you first met one of your best friends. What drew you to them? What intrigued you? What qualities did they possess that you cherished? Qualities that are important to me are compassion, honesty, and trustworthiness. I'm drawn to those who are reflective and have a depth of spirit. Those are qualities that I value in a friendship and qualities that I attempt to nurture in myself. Each of our friendships tells us something about ourselves, whether formed quickly and deeply or more slowly and deliberately. There are things that draw you to others and them to you. Bradley Trevor Grieve, in his book, Friends to the End, The True Value of Friendship, wrote, "Not all friendships turn out to be really rewarding, but if you end up in a stinker, it's because you've compromised what is really important to you. You cannot be there for anyone else if you are not first true to yourself." How might you become the person you want to be friends with? Through nurturing the relationships with yourself, providing for your own needs, taking care of yourself physically, mentally, and spiritually. When you have unkind thoughts about yourself, don't allow them to become the norm, the unquestioned default response. Interrogate them. Some have found asking your self-critic, "Would you ever say that to a friend who made a mistake?" Most of us would never dream of saying to another person what we say to ourselves. So why is it okay to say it to myself? For me, I've found it helpful to ask myself, can I imagine one of my friends saying those words to me? I bring to mind one of my friends and imagine if she would agree with what I just told myself. If not, then the shame and blame I'm placing on myself is probably not an accurate reflection of reality. Another way that's been helpful to me, it may or may not be helpful to you, is when I find myself being exceptionally unkind to myself, I ask, would God say that to me? Be kind to yourself. This is where legacy begins, with yourself. The legacy that I hope to leave is one of compassion, kindness, and connection. This is a relational legacy. With each choice we make, we nourish and nurture legacy, beginning with the relationship with ourselves. Imagine that you are a pinprick of light. As you feed your spirit, nourish yourself, your light grows, expanding outward in an ever-widening circle. See the pinprick of light emanate from others, also in an ever-expanding circle. Your light overlaps with others and continues to grow, radiating outward from each person until all is light, banishing darkness. Let your legacy be one in which you are the person you want to be friends with. You are the kind of person, the friend the world needs. Amen.
Most of the time when I'm crying during a sermon, I'm at home in my office, but now I'm doing it in public again. So that's good. Thank you, dear friend. That was lovely. As a way of reflecting, let's participate in our next hymn, Glenn Thomas Rideout's arrangement of Wo Ya Ya.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. Heaven knows, but we know we are going. Heaven knows where 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 we are going. But we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows where we will get there. But we know within, it will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know within. Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know within. It'll be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh, yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we know. Oh, yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Heaven knows.
We've come to our times of joy and concerns. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. We'll see you next Sunday. Jesse,